Yes.
What percentage of adherents would you say are in it for like the actual theology of it, and how many just are attracted to the manliness, the aesthetic, the everything that you were talking about, the kind of the last part of the attractiveness of it?
Well, last I looked at it, I have the statistic in front of me right now. You have, I'll find it for you, school next time. There's something of 7,000 what you might call registered Asatru are within the United States alone. And so they did kid you not, a heathen census back in 2014. And at that time it was 7,000 Asatru are, not 7,000 pagans or neo-pagans or Wiccans or Satanists, 7,000 Asatru are alone. And of those that are actively registered, spreading the good word, you have on a consistent basis around 670, promoting it. We're talking about influencers, key figures, etc. If you were to ask me, walking that back, how many there are that have a passing interest, I don't have an exact number. I don't want to speculate, but say it's more than 7,000. So I would grant you that there's a larger amount that have a passing interest. But that's all a demonic influence needs, is a passing interest in it. We see that with certain key singers and performers at their shows right now, with having Wiccan imagery as part of their shows. Does the devil care whether or not they have pledged an oath anywhere? No. Does it invite the demonic presence, the possibility for spiritual warfare? Yes. Yes.
I don't have a question, but this is amazing to me to hear this. I knew nothing about this Norse paganism worship or interest at all. It's amazing, interesting.
Yes.
I'm trying to think of how to train your dragon. Like, I've watched that show with my kids. I love it because it's like flying like Top Gun, but you're on a dragon.
I've not heard it put that way. I like that though. Top Gun for Norse. All right.
No. I mean, you're flying on a dragon like through rocks or whatever. So and it had the dragon's like a Labrador Retriever. They make it very entertaining.
Right.
They're using the Nordic characters in that, and I love the movie. I mean, I love to watch the story, and I sit down and I watch it with my kids, but it's very much
Nordic. Well, and I don't want to discourage that either, because this is, like you study anything bad, all of a sudden you see witches everywhere, you see pagans everywhere. That's not the case. I mean, you can dress up, even within Catholic classical schools, not just ours. I'm not randomly naming mine, but you can dress up as even these characters for play and pretend, but those children come from families of rooted backgrounds that were more formed. You just said it yourself. You've sat down and watched these with them. You've done what I've done. You've censored via discussion. But a lot of these children and young adults are being left to themselves, either at a young age in front of the screen, left to censor it for themselves, or they never grew up with a formation, and so even at the college level or young adult level, they're as susceptible as the 5-year-old in front of the screen. I mean, I like How to Train Your Dragon, by the way. Don't worry, you can still watch it. All right, but it's good because you can recognize certain things within those that you can at least point the child towards. That just say, this is this thing.
Well, I watched it and I didn't realize any of this backstory was going on. Is my point.
What?
I was even naive to this whole sort of media cult development for what you're talking about. So I was oblivious.
And you can see how shiny they make it. And
Yes.
Again, it can be enjoyed if you know that, but it's shiny. They omit all of the negative parts. When we read Hamilton's mythology in 9th grade, Edith Hamilton does not shy away from the dark shades of the mythology as well. So you're studying it for its good and its bad, its right and its wrong, and how it helped a pre-Christian people be ready to receive Christ when he came into the world. It's framed, it can be read if it's framed in a Christian worldview. But is the MCU, is any of these other stories. So if they're not framed, they have to, by you as the parent, frame them into a Christian worldview, or some may not even be able to be framed. It's too far past framing into a worldview, and it needs to be left be. So, for example, I would not ever recommend Vikings. I did censor that myself, and that is to young adults what the Marvel Cinematic Universe might be to a child, because they might actually find all of this brotherhood and bloodshed and it's darker than the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but for what you might call an acceptable level for a young adult. Darker themes that they could watch and think that they were okay, but they're becoming ever more attracted to it. So you have to, again, be rooted, grounded in those things. I know one person that genuinely thinks that it's a wonderful thing to talk with me about comparing their blood eagle sacrifice to my Lord's crucifixion. They're like, they're the same thing. I'm like, why is that okay? Like, I'm not saying, yay, my Lord got crucified. Like, it's a fact that he got crucified. We do call it Good Friday, but we don't celebrate the cross. We celebrate Christ on the cross and the crucifixion.
So, did you say that they could pick which gods to worship, or if they just worship one or all of them?
They pick which gods to worship. There's a gentleman in town whose name is and this is not me respecting him, but I am protecting his what he calls government name, Einar, who was one of my interviews for the last 2 years, who he worships Odin, Freya, and Heimdall, I think. And so he's like, most of us all worship Odin, but we have one or two other gods that we also worship. So they have a primary and a few secondaries.
So how do they? Didn't you say they had two religious books? What are in the religious books? Because you said they choose how to worship and what they worship.
Well, their books are like with the Hindus with the New Age practices. Remember we talked about the Vedic text inside of class, the Vedas. They're like the scriptures, the Bible for...
Well, but they had a structured religion. You choose your religion.
Well, no, the Hindu could choose the religion as well. The Hindu religion was very various, all right, because the Hindu religion was more of a culture. Same thing here. The Eddas are religious texts that tell the story of the Norse mythology. So it's a lot like Hamilton's mythology. It's a storybook of the gods and how they came to be. But it doesn't give any specific prescriptions of thou shalt in there. Now, it does give you a lot of sacrifices and spells and suggestions, but it's more of a reference manual than it is a binding
So
book.
you can choose to do like any ceremonies at all. Like you don't even have to do any ceremonies.
Well, you don't have to do anything with it. It's what's known as orthopraxic. It's done by the very practice of the thing. You're part of Norse paganism or Asatru. But you can take and leave what you want. So theoretically, you could, yeah. Mrs. Summers, you had one?
Oh, I was bouncing off this, like, because of the timing of the 70s, I see, like, a thread. I want to go back and research this aspect of it, just curious. With the growth of it in the 70s, and, you know, a lot of the comic books originating from, like, the 60s and 70s, I wonder if there was an influence that seeped into the Marvel comics back then when it was on the rise.
Well,
We're seeing the trickle effect now pushing to MCU.
Well, I did explore that to some extent. Thor actually came about in the 60s, 1962, which is 10 years ahead of this.
Okay.
So you can say that it's part of the same cultural phenomena, but it predates these practices by 10 years. So unless we can dig in some deep closet somewhere and find someone related to the MCU that's related to them and they were designing it 10 years before, and that's some real DEFCON 5 level research. I don't see it, and allegedly Thor was created only because they needed someone that could beat the Hulk. So they were like, who's stronger than the Hulk? A god! All right, and they just jumped to Thor. Catherine, and then Romy, your name?
Right.
Right, all right.
What is it about America that makes it take to all the New Age things?
Well, again, just from a Catholic worldview, from a Catholic standpoint, it's the individuality. It's also the ability to pick and choose. It's the lack of rooting. We've been experiencing this ever since the Protestant Revolution. We've seen that the more we go along, the more we become unanchored, the more we become decentralized, And the thing is we thought that if we got rid of that thing, if we came from this thing, that we would be able to find our way. But the problem is, whenever you empty yourself of something, you're going to be filled with something else. And so I would say that's a large part of it. But the individualism, my opinion, this is not hard, my formed opinion, is it's the individualism, because that's what's at the heart of the occult, is when an individual despairs of God's providence and decides that they're going to try to steal the base code, the secret knowledge of the universe to do what they want because God's not giving them what they want. So America is a wonderful place. I'm not decrying America, but I am decrying Americanism, this hyper-emphasis on self, this individualism. And individualism goes hand in hand with occultism. You thinking you know what's best in all cases inevitably leads you to not even trust the Creator himself and to try to take that knowledge into your own hands. Now, we've had the occult well before America, but I think America soaks it up for these reasons.
Yeah, first I'll make a comment. First, I've read all the Thor comic books growing up. When they first came out, I thought they were amazing, so I wish I kept all the comic books I bought. The other thing I want to ask is that, now this is on New Age. I don't know much about New Age, but there's a guy, what's his name? Eckhart Tolle?
Oh, Eckhart.
Eckhart Tolle. Now he's New Age, right? Or something?
T-O-L-L-E, I think it was his last
He,
name.
talked about what Oprah Winfrey used to be on his program. Eckhart Tolle,
Eckhart, E.
Tolle or something.
I haven't heard of
A
that.
German.
I mean, they wouldn't be surprised. A lot of the New Age comes from Germany.
Well, I was just
No offense to
curious-
any Germans in the
No, that's okay. I'm just curious to see what's the relationship between him and this New Age, because I don't think he was talking about God. Not that I know, but
Well, that's the interesting part of it. One, I don't know about who you're talking about, but I will research them when I get home, because
Eckhart Tolle.
one of my talks I'm going to give next year, I have at least 2 talks coming up that I'm going to give. This is all part of what Christine said earlier, part of combating the New Age movement. And so one next year will be on Wiccanism and Christology, because, again, those are ones that are even more unique to Tennessee than they are other places. There's a phenomenal prevalence here. But it all circles the drain around the same thing. It's, as I've grew up with these, as I explored and investigated these more, now converted and Catholic, I keep noticing that all of these are simply the surface. They're the man. They're not the man behind the curtain. There is an invisible hand, without sounding like a conspiracy nut, and it is theosophy. What happens is all of these things, whether they're right or not, get taken over by theosophy, by the occult. You have the pagans, Frankenstein vampired by the occult. You have the Hinduistic practices, same thing. You have the yogic practices. Even Satanism, ironically, actually, the name, even though it suggests a worship of Satan, doesn't even worship Satan. If you look at it, it's an occult manifestation or Frankensteining of a worship of Satan. So all of these things are being taken over by this group of people that would like to defer to secret knowledge, which is also called esotericism. It's called esotericism. It's called the occultism. It's called, what was the other one I said earlier? Cultism. Oh, theosophy. It's all the same thing. It's this magic or base code. So maybe Eckhart.
Technology. What is this secret knowledge? I mean,
Well, the secret knowledge. Imagine that there's you ever seen the Matrix movies or know the premise of them? Imagine that code in the Matrix. I mean, there's a dozen ways to describe this, but there's this code, this programming, and so if you just get hold of the code of this programming to the universe, if you can see the code, you can control the code. And therefore, you can manipulate the universe. You can manipulate reality. And then, therefore, you're dependent on no one, including God. It's as wacko as it sounds, but you can go very far and down very dark paths with it. And keeping in mind that, again, with demonic influence, demons don't care whether or not we believe in it. They'll help us damn ourselves. So they'll help us participate in these things. So these people may experience some things that appear to be working, but they're really just being duped by demonic influence.
yeah, there was. I'm sure you've seen a show like America's Talent Show,
Right.
And they had this
Talent.
magician, and he did this amazing magician trick. And Simon Crow, is that his name? One of the
Simon Cowell.
Simon Cowell, and he asked the magician. He says, did you sell your soul for the devil for that? And the magicians gleefully, he smiled, remember, he said, yes, I did. And Simon Cowell, his name, he goes, so did I. And they both smiled. I thought, wow, is that creepy or not?
Well, to give you, again, not to give away too much of the lecture sometime in the spring, but it all comes down to, once you trace theosophy, once you trace the occult, the Kabbalah, etc., you get down to what's known as Luciferianism. All right? And so, yes, it is different from Satanism. I know a lot of people say, well, they both mean the devil, and that is true, but there are differences, just as there are between the pagan and the occultist. But, and I have watched videos on this. I have actually talked with one person that admits this. They believe that the beginning of time, that the God we know is the bully God, that he is the creator God, but that he wields his power over you and his knowledge, and he never shares. All right? And they believe that Lucifer was the benevolent rebel god, or angel, that came in and rescued the knowledge of the universe away from God for the sake of us, and he was willing to risk the fall, the damnation, to give it to us. So that's how people have wrapped it in their heads to romanticize the devil, is that he's this Robin Hood of theology that has helped us out, and he was so benevolent as to be damned for all of eternity because of it. And so now stop. Now, you see, that's very similar to the Greco-Roman story of Prometheus, this god that rescued fire from the other gods. Well, in that story in Greek mythology, it's told in a bad way. Like, he's bad for having taken the fire. So you're seeing this story echo throughout, but it is prevalent. People think that Lucifer rescued for us this knowledge and that it's our job to find it. Yes?
There's a man named Zachary King.
Take the last question.
Yes.
I'm the last one. There's a man named Zachary King that I learned about this fall that has converted to Catholicism, but he used to be a high wizard. And he has some YouTube videos. I encourage you to just check him out.
Zachary King sounds familiar. I try to get to the historical stuff, but I skip past a lot of the present day stuff that gets more interesting within the last decade or so.
But his take on, how he naively walked into it as a child, like raised as a Baptist or not really with much religious education, but then how he got into it because it was more power and more power and more power. And then he had a come to Jesus moment in a jewelry store. Like a Catholic woman said, "Here, you need to have this miraculous medal." And he said he saw his light flash before his eyes. He was converted. So he's Catholic. I mean, he's Catholic now. Like, he goes, I go to adoration like every day because I've done a lot of bad things. But anyway, his testimony is powerful, and it kind of goes in line with everything that you're saying, like how some naively have a void and they meander into something that is not good.
No, and it takes a snap too. I won't share mine right now for the sake of time, but yeah, the same thing. It's alluring and attractive, and I came very close to Egyptian, chakric, yogic, even Merlinic practices, and that's a shame because the story of Merlin and Arthur is an inherently Christian story. But I snapped out to it, thanks be to God, in college, thanks to C.S. Lewis. Where's Felicity when I need to say that? All right. Anyway.
I just wanted to thank you. I know I still have questions, so hopefully you'll stick around.
Oh, I will.
Thank you. Let's say a blessing. Bless us, the Lord, Jesus Christ,
We're about to receive from thy bounty through Christ our Lord. Amen.
souls of the faithful departed.
You are so glad, rest in peace. Amen. One quick mention before you leave. Christine mentioned this to me before, an hour or so before we didn't realize this. Today is the death day of Fulton Sheen. So when he eventually becomes canonized, we had a Sheen talk on his feast day.